Do you feel like there are ethics or an ethical approach or an ethos to filmmaking nowadays?
I don't think so. I think like some directors made a living out of non-redemptive stories and really appealing to the dark side of human nature. Like I think of like Quentin Tarantino.
It does seem like there's a blurring right now of reality, and I think there's always going to be room for experimenting in filmmaking, right? And being more expressive versus having a concrete story arc. I think there will always be that in art. That's fine. I think it's expression. But one thing we've talked about is no matter where you sit politically, no matter where you sit on the spiritual spectrum or world, you can admit in a lot of ways that the morality card in a lot of ways seems to be missing across the board. Does that affect the stories themselves? I think it does over time. Again, these are very broad strokes. I don't think either of us are trying to like come down too hard on this, but what you start to see is when you're pushing something so hard into a bias in general, you start losing the story structure that could appeal to more people. Right. So are these films that are being made nowadays, are they appealing directly to a specific niche? It seems like it is, and that's where I feel like it seems like it's experimental.
The moment that you start pushing an agenda through your film, you're gonna lose people. Because filmmaking is about storytelling. It's about just the hero's journey. It's about just getting from A to B from a story perspective. And that will make people feel, that will make people think. You don't need to throw an agenda on someone's face every time that you make a film, even if it's an advocacy film. Like you just did Spellers, which is an advocacy film for non-speaking autism, like for that community. And it's a story about each individual character there, and you trace their journey and you see how far they've progressed. They're not screaming at you, you gotta recognize those people, or like no one's paying attention to them, come on guys, what's going on? It's like, hey, no, look at what their struggles, look at their stories. Like at the end of it, you're like, how can I not do something about it? Or my doc, Right for Freedom, is about 8 cyclists who put their lives on the line to raise funds and awareness towards anti-human trafficking. And yeah, we talk about human trafficking and the problem and stuff, but the main thing that you want to see there, and that's feedback that I've gotten in like the pre-screening process, is that they're like, wow, after watching this, I like really want to do something hard and like difficult for a cause. Like I've gotten this feedback from 2 people that are very different, and they were both like, yeah, after watching this, like this makes me want to go do something hard and push myself for something bigger than me. And I was like, dang, like that's so powerful. But it's because they just saw 8 dudes who had no like a lot of them are not professional cyclists, like, or none of them are, and they had no business like putting their bodies through what they put their bodies through. But then you finish it and you're like, oh dang, I'm changed. And we didn't just shove an agenda down your throat the entire time. We just told a story.
So how can it be approachable? And I think that is the ethical approach. That's the ethos, because we as filmmakers and this next generation of real indie work that's coming and these boutique production companies that's coming, those are all destroying the big studio model that exists right now. And Hollywood's really in shambles at the moment. And I think they don't know how to package the summer blockbuster anymore. And I don't think, and when they go straight to streaming a week later, it's a really different experience. That shows where the market's at right now. And I think these are the films that people are wanting to see. These are the films that we're talking about right now that don't shove an agenda down your throat, but let you approach them and form your own opinion. I think that is the kind of stuff that people want to see. And your point on wanting to see those in niche categories, that's really important too. And they're lifestyle things. And it doesn't mean that they have to be these boring stories. They could be larger than life, but they're based on very small stories that people go through. You have to create an experience that's relatable for your audience. And I also think there's a morality standard in that it doesn't tell people this is how you should be living, but it says here's an example of how some people have it, which is not as nice. here's how you could make an impact in a smaller way this way, you
Right.
know, by watching this project or whatever.
Totally. I'm super challenged by that. I think like we as humans were created for redemption.
Yeah.
We know that something's wrong. We know that our world is broken.
Mm-hmm.
We know that our lives are broken.
Yeah.
And we all know that we need redemption and forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that every human longs for.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that come from? It comes from scripture. It comes from the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're both Christians, and you know, in every culture, everyone has that longing for forgiveness and redemption.
A second chance.
For a second chance. Like everyone
Everyone's made
knows
those
that there's
mistakes.
something wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously for us, the answer is found in Christ.
Right.
But the way that plays out in filmmaking is like, if you play those notes, you're not only doing people a service, like by helping them to think about that urge,
Yeah.
but you're also like essentially just helping people and helping your audience to reflect on, you know, what they're made for. I used to think of my career as like, I kind of had an identity crisis of like, why am I doing this? Like, does anyone really benefit from it?
Right.
You know, I think
You
every
feel that
filmmaker
way when
goes
you're
from
starting in commercial and you don't really, you're
Right.
just like, okay, this is selling product. It's not really.
Right. But then you think like, no, I'm doing this so I can be successful, so I can serve people in that way.
Right.
Like if it's a, you know, corporate exec that's getting the project and is just for selling a product, I mean, that's still his livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
That's still like a whole team,
Yeah.
internal team's livelihood that, you know, you're helping play a part of. So that's where, like, if you have that mentality of like, I'm gonna help these people and I'm gonna make this as redemptive as I can, and if I can't make it redemptive in the story, if it's just selling product, I'll make it redemptive in the experience.
Yeah.
And when they see my name out and the funds for original projects come, I want those original projects to play those notes, because that's what I want people to see.
Yeah. And I think what the point you're making too, that's really powerful, is you need to figure out what your purpose, longing, desire is. And we, you know, as Christians, believers, we think that, you know, that's directly from Christ, because that's what we've grown up knowing, and that's what we understand as believers now. But I think everybody has to find their centeredness in something, right? But I think, you know, without it getting too faith-based, I think, you know, there's just the ultimate story in the Bible story and what, you know, Jesus came to earth to do.
Right.
That is a redemptive story. That is the only redemptive story that, you know, to save mankind from sin. I mean, that's the story that when we say there's nothing new under the sun,
Right.
that's the reason, because that's the ultimate hero's journey that we all write off of. If you know, you could compare it to, that's how Narnia was, that's how The Hobbit is, that's how all of Lord of the Rings, that's how all of them are written. They're written off, Harry Potter's written off that plot.
Dune plays off of that plot. Star Wars,
I know.
even, you can make.
They're
like,
all about it. They're all about it.
It's
I
crazy.
mean, the crazy part for me is in Harry Potter, Harry literally dies and comes back to life. It's the exact same storyline, and he's killed by what is the epitome of death. So it's the same kind of, like, you see that and you're like, that's the ultimate story. There's no other story that follows that, and we all play off of that in one way or another. And it's very interesting to me, because obviously I think Christians get a really bad rap because there's a lot of Christians that are not gracious and good people, but that's their sin nature. We are all sinful. But I do think that a lot of early storytelling started from that plot.
No,
and it's not a plot, it was reality, but I mean,
Right.
it's so far-fetched for us because it was so many years ago,
right.
that no one living has ever experienced what that was like. We can only read that in the Bible, which is, you know, the most distributed book of all time.
Right.
So when you look at that, you're like, okay, so, you know, Christians have a bad rap, but that's not how the Bible story,
Doesn't
the
affect
gospel
the story.
was.
Yes.
But everybody's writing about that. Even pagans were writing about, pagans were writing about that from near Bible times on. Every arc is built somewhat off of that. Regardless of what it is, there is always a standard of ethos or ethics in every project. But should ethics be more of a standard? My answer would be yes.
Yes,
on
100%.
a broad level. I think it's the rule book for film.
I agree.
And I believe that film has different rule books, but I do believe that that's really
Right.
important. You need to see that.
I wholeheartedly agree. And if a film ends in tragedy, there's redemption in tragedy.
There sure is.
If a film ends on, like a breakup or the death of a loved one, like there's redemption there, and there's something that can be left with the character for the audience, even in like a technically non-redemptive ending.